Hi AP people, this is your third module. Today we're going to talk about European politics and how they influence the New World. I know, fun stuff. It's not as bad as it sounds, but before we get there, we got some skills-based stuff to take a look at. All right, so I gave you something that looks like this. This paper is going to be your guide. Keep it because this will help you break down what questions are being asked of you. Okay? So have this thing out because you're about to see some different types of questions and that'll help you kind of answer them. So let's take a look today. All right. So our big overreaching question is how can we understand Europe during the colonial period? All right. The goal here is to take a look at what's happening in Europe and why Europeans are going out and exploring the world and what kind of comes out from it. So our focus questions are, what were the major motivating factors driving European exploration? Straightforward question. What were? Okay? This is an identification question. Okay? So identify. Specifically link an idea, person, or event to another person, idea, or event in the time period. In the time period. So what does it look like? Historians point to Columbus's landing on the island of Hispaniola as the start of colonialization in the Americas. Okay, so a question might be, what was the what was the beginning of colonialization in the Americas? What question? Straightforward. There's your answer. Historians point to Columbus's landing on the island of Hispaniola as the start of colonialization. It's a straightforward answer. Now, with a question like this, we don't want to get lazy. What were the motivating factors? Remember how I told you about AP and how we got to watch out for those little itty-bitty things? That S right there is important because S means more than one. And here is a rule. Whenever we see more than one in AP, we don't want two, we want at least three. Okay? So, anytime you see that, you need to identify something. We don't want to be lazy. We want to give three. That's the rule of three for AP. Okay? 3 pieces of evidence, 3 details to support your idea. Okay? That's what separates the men from the boys. That's what separates the women from the girls. It's your ability to go in depth. It's your ability to give a little bit more. Okay? So that's one thing. Next, we have a how question. How would these motivating factors have influenced European perceptions of Native Americans? Now, this question is going towards making connections or linking ideas. Okay? Let's see. So this would be kind of explain, describe, and analyze. Okay? What you have to do here is you have to make a connection. Where did it go? Oh, PowerPoint. That's right. Okay, so you have to make a connection. How would the motivating factors, okay, what motivating factors? The ones that you found up here. Your identified 3, okay? So how would those 3 things have influenced European perceptions of Native Americans? Okay? So, you identified 3 things. How is that going to influence how Europeans perceive or see Native Americans? Okay? So based on what we find why Europeans are going to the Americas, is that going to help give them a good or bad impression of the Native Americans? And why? Okay? There's another thing for AP. Okay? I know you don't like that, but it's true. Never will you just see a yes or a no question. Last, okay, in this one you're going to see a lot in AP. To what extent? To what extent? That means how much or how little. This is asking you to make a claim, okay? And a claim could look something like this. The Northern victory in the Civil War benefited African American rights to a great extent. This is a measure. It's a lot, it's a little bit, and then, of course, you have to explain why. Now, the question that we're posed here is, to what extent do these forces still influence major world countries? Okay, so this is an opinion that you must defend. Okay, and for that you rely on your own knowledge. Now, I understand you won't have that much frame of reference on this one, but I want you to give a stab at it. I want you to think, okay, what do I know about the world? What do I know about politics? You know, what have I learned so far? You know, there's a presidential election coming. I'm listening to these people. Is it still the same thing that the Europeans were going after back then, that we're going after now? That kind of thing. Okay? Have we gotten better? Have we gotten worse? All right. So, we broke down our questions. We know what we're looking at. Let's delve into the history, shall we? All right. So, why the heck are Europeans going to go and explore the world anyway? Okay, meet King Louis XIV. His nickname was the Sun King. Okay? Yeah, just take a look at that. Look at that robe. That huge robe. That guy just stands there like, yeah, I'm the boss. He ruled France forever. He had all the power in his hands, didn't have to share it with anybody. Okay? And he's kind of a symbol of the kings of Europe and the power they had. So by the 15th century, powerful monarchies are established in major European countries. Okay? These guys have power. And if you're a king and you have power over your country, well, you can tell your people what to do, but you can't tell the people in the next country what to do. And these guys have egos. So Louis had an ego like a lot of other guys have egos. So he's competing with the King of France and with the King of Spain and with the Holy Roman Emperor, amongst other people, for more power and prestige. They're all going to war with each other. They're all intermarried with each other. You know, one's the other one's cousin. And that's how it works. And they all want more power because, guess what? Humans always want more power. Okay, you're never satisfied with just enough. Okay, if you like Jordans, well, 2 pairs isn't enough. You need 4 or 6. You know, if you have a Lamborghini, you want a Ferrari too. Well, it's kind of like the same thing with these guys. It's all about the money, and they want more money. They want more power. So they would marry each other off. They would form alliances. They would go to war with each other, all to kind of advance their own personal glory and the glory of their country. Because the country was kind of the personification of them, or they were the personification of the country, I should say. So, how do you go to war? How do you get more territory? Gold, money. Okay, the more money and the more resources you have, the more power that you have, the more prestige that you have, the bigger of a boss you are. Does this stuff sound familiar? I think so. Now, how do they show it? Let's take a look here. Okay, these pictures I took last year. This is the palace that Louis built just to show how big of a boss he was. Okay, this is the Palace of Versailles. It was built outside of Paris. He built an entire city for himself where he could take his nobles and rule over them and control them. Okay, this is the Hall of Mirrors. That's going to play an important part in World War I when we get there, but you know, you have to understand, glass was very expensive at this time. If he could build an entire hall with nothing but mirrors, and he brought guests there to kind of show off, they're going to take one look at that and be like, damn, this guy's got money. This guy's got power. You know, I mean, take a look at this. I mean, gold everywhere. You know, for real. I mean, this guy was like ridiculous. Gigantic fountains, gardens, everything. His power, all right, so people under him, their power was determined on how close they could get to him. So one of the biggest prestiges you could have in France at that time was going to watch the king eat. Yes. Okay? Those seats right there are set up at his dinner table. So people would actually go and watch the guy eat. And if you watch the guy eat, that would show, oh, you're pretty powerful stuff because you get to see the king eat. Yeah, our power guys have nothing on this guy. I mean, you talk about ego. Okay, so ego, power, money, respect, that's pushing people, but there's also another factor, and that's going to be the church. Okay, so the Roman Catholic Church, until the mid-1500s, when that's going to start to break up, but we're not there yet because we got to remember it's 1492 when the Americas are going to be discovered. So the Catholic Church had a lot of power. Okay, and the popes are going to be just as powerful as the just as powerful as the monarchs of Europe, and they're going to compete with them. Okay, they're going to try to get power, and guess what? Money, power, corruption, right? So these guys are also going to get power. This guy right here, okay, meet Pope Alexander VI. He was the Pope around the time that all the discovery stuff is going to happen, and just to give you an idea, just this guy. Okay, so Catholic Church, priests aren't supposed to marry, priests aren't supposed to have kids. You're supposed to give yourself completely to God. You're supposed to do away with all kind of worldly possession. All right, so just to give you an idea of this guy, the way he became Pope, it was rumored that he bribed the other cardinals to vote for him with cartloads of silver. You know that thing about never marrying or never having kids? Yeah, he had a bunch of kids, and with different women, I should say. And in order to make sure that his lineage was pure and he could have an heir that he could trust, he wasn't like the other monarchs of Europe where, you marry off your son or your daughter to somebody else. Nah, his grandkids, he kind of put his son and his daughter together to have those grandkids. So go figure that out. So these guys had tons of money. They had tons of power. They were very, very, very corrupt. We get some beautiful things from it. This is the Church of the Sistine Chapel that Michelangelo had to paint for Alexander VI, partly in penance because he was a raging homosexual. And the center of that is, where Adam is reaching and God is touching the forefinger of Adam. So big time power. And the church is going to have big influence over the kings of Europe. Everybody was expected to give 1/10 of all of their wealth and income to the church at the time. So they're going to be going over to the Americas to carry on the glory of God as well as to try to make money for themselves, because part of what these monarchs did, like King Louis up here, is they wanted to show that, they were more religious than the next guy. So the more money they could kick up to the church and, the more power they had with the church, that's kind of like another alliance. Okay? That church stuff don't last too long. So by the mid-1500s, we start to see the Reformation. You guys remember we talked about in Global, Martin Luther, he went and nailed his 95 Thesis to the door of the church in Wittenberg, Germany. And that's going to start a reform movement in the Catholic Church. That reform movement is going to do a couple of things. Number one, it's going to start to break the monarchs away from the church. Okay? So the monarchs are no longer necessarily going to be just Catholic. They could choose to be Protestant. A lot of the northern European countries here, that you see up here, they're going to choose to be Protestant. Well, a lot of the southern and central European countries are going to remain Catholic. And that's kind of the way it is today. Most Germans and Scandinavians and British are Protestant. And the French and the Spanish, the Italians and the Eastern Europeans, well, they're Catholic. Now, that's going to also bring new ideas. And new ideas are going to help spread things. All right, so let's talk about let's talk about the Spanish, okay? Let's talk about Europe in general. Europe's emerging from the Middle Ages. The Crusades against the Muslims had spurred demand for Asian goods. Okay, so you had a lot of people, you had a lot of power, you had a lot of wealth, and they want more stuff. The stuff's got to come from Asia. How do you get to Asia? Well, you got to go and you got to trade. The only thing is, you got to go through the Muslim Empire. This time it was, not quite the Ottomans. The Ottomans are going to come in the mid 15th century. So it's going to be one of the caliphates, and that's going to turn to the Ottomans. You got to go through them. Well, if they're fighting crusades against them, it's not going to be too easy to get there. Marco Polo went in the 13th century. He wrote all those stories about everything in China, and that's going to spur demand. So there's going to be a lot of demand to get over there, but there's not really going to be a lot of ways to do it. And then the Portuguese are going to start to travel by boat, because this area over here is all Muslim, and Muslims didn't like Europeans too much. So to trade with them, they had to pay a lot of money. So the Portuguese are going to try to find ways to get around that. They're going to start to explore. All right, they're going to begin oceanic explorations in the 15th century. They start by going down the coast of Africa. Eventually they get to Cape of Good Hope. Then they go around the Cape of Good Hope and they get to India. Okay? Now, this is going to start a few things. This is going to expand trade with Asia. Now they're no longer dependent on trading with the Muslims to get there. They don't have to pay outrageous fees. It's going to begin something that we call the African slave trade. But this is a huge distance. Africa is ginormous. So in order to get around to Africa, it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to cost lots and lots and lots of money. So they're not going to be too keen on that idea. Okay? That's going to give somebody else the idea to go the other way. Now, let's also set things up with Spain, because we know who did Columbus sail for? He sailed for Spain. And the Spanish are definitely going to have something to prove, because they were new. Okay? Spain, as we know of today, did not exist until 1492. How do we know that year, 1492? That's the year that Columbus sailed the ocean blue. It's not a coincidence. Okay? Ferdinand and Isabella. Okay, we know those names from elementary school. Ferdinand was actually the weaker of the two. Isabella was one bad. Okay? So Isabella, she was in this area right here, which we call Castile. That's a region in Spain. That was one of the richer regions. Okay? Ferdinand had this area here we call Aragon. Okay? Castile, bigger than Aragon. So Isabella was the more powerful of the two, the more wealthy of the two. They married and basically created a big army. What did they do with that big army? Well, this area down here, Cordoba, that was Muslim Spain. Okay? So they're going to be pushing the Muslims down. And by the time Ferdinand and Isabella were around, they had gotten them down to here, this little area of Grenada here. But it was symbolic, because, you know, they're good Catholics. They don't want Muslims in their territory. They finally completed kicking out the Muslims in 1492. That made them big and bad in the Pope's eyes. Okay, remember him? Okay, so he finally got, so Ferdinand and Isabella finally got the Muslims out of Spain. They got the Pope's favor. They are the rising stars. They got a big military. They're able to defeat one of the big superpowers, the Muslims at the time. And they're going to want to capitalize on that. They're going to want to go out and get more money and more prestige. So they want to cash in on that trade. You know, Portugal, which is over here, Portugal shares the Iberian Peninsula with Spain. So Portugal is kind of the eastern part here. Spain's the bigger part of it. They're going to want to compete too. Portuguese have already established some routes, so they're going to go find something else. That's when that guy Columbus comes in, which we're going to talk about more of him next time. So, we just went over some stuff here, okay? This is the political situation going on in Europe before Columbus, okay? So we talked about some big ideas here, okay? Remember what we got to do. What are some motivating factors? Why are the Europeans going out and exploring? Projecting forward. Now that we know these motivating factors, how are they going to look at the Native Americans? And the reasons the Europeans are going out, to what extent does that still influence major countries of the world? All right, AP people, you know the deal. We just went through it. We broke down the history. Now it's your job to get your handle on things so that tomorrow you can come in and have an intelligent debate and discussion on it. and then we're going to springboard off of that. We're going to take a look at some documents to deal with. As always, you have any questions, concerns, comments, whatever, hit me up with that email. Give me just, you know the deal. Don't email me at 2 o'clock in the morning. Expect a response. You're not getting it. Okay, that's it. Have a great night, AP people.